don't think that Kate will do that interview. She is being groomed and groomed and groomed to be the non-Diana.
Tina.
Good morning, John.
Good morning. Happy Monday.
Good morning to you.
We have been doing the Jubilee Fest all over the TV all weekend, even on this side of the pond, of course, the cover of Newsweek. This is fascinating to me just in terms of a profile in leadership. Someone who's been the reigning monarch for 60 years, came in when Churchill was in office. Do you think that Queen Elizabeth is the last of her breed, that the kind of discretion that she's been able to use will be possible in the future with the digital age?
She really is extraordinary in the way she's made self-effacement her brand, in a sense.
Yeah.
And by adhering to that relentlessly, never being distracted from that, she has achieved this extraordinary iconic status. The succession is looking good, actually. With we don't want to dwell too long on Prince Charles, but I don't think we will dwell too long because the Queen's in very good health and will probably make it through to 102 herself. So he'll be in his 80s anyway. But William and Kate seem like they're in pretty good shape. I think that it could happen that if William and Kate can somehow master this self-effacement too, it could happen.
So that raises one of the points you made in Diana Chronicles is that the sense that maybe the aristocracy of birth was on its way out, and that Diana understood the aristocracy of exposure. With all the festivities, and is Queen Elizabeth starting to show an understanding of some of those lessons herself about detailed surgical exposure?
Absolutely. Nobody knows better than the Queen how to play the long game. And actually, I think in a way, Diana was the kind of apogee of the culture of exposure. It's gone on and on and on since. But we're also seeing a great fatigue with it. And so in some ways, the only kind of mystery left is when you don't speak, which the Queen never has. A TV producer said to me just this morning, I want you to help us get Kate Middleton for TV. I don't think that Kate will do that interview, because I think that she is being groomed and groomed and groomed to be the non-Diana. And part of that is about not letting that exposure get out of hand. And the Queen has very carefully throughout her reign played out the exposure. I mean, at the beginning, starting from the very beginning, when whether or not to have TV cameras in the Abbey. At that point, Winston Churchill actually was very much against, and so was the Archbishop of Canterbury, said no BBC cameras because it would have been the first time. But the Queen actually said, no, I think we should do this. I think we should have cameras. So that was a great decision. Then there was a long silence again, and then in the 60s, just when they were becoming very, very irrelevant, she did allow the cameras into that royal family documentary. So that was another little bit of exposure, very, very carefully managed. Then there was the hideous period in the 90s when the whole family went crazy and were overexposed all the time. And that really was for her a really terrible period.
The decade horribilis.
The decade horribilis. But she, again, kept her counsel, kept in the background, and now is loosening up just a little bit again. So she's been so careful, so judicious with letting daylight into magic.
I love it. It's sort of Queen Elizabeth PR genius. With William and Kate, I mean, you indicated, is there sort of a generational rapprochement? I mean, it's no longer the fight between the baby boomers and the generation that Queen Elizabeth represents, but maybe some sort of synthesis that they represent that can sustain the monarchy further than perhaps it would have.
Well, it is an incredible irony. I mean, simply by living as long as she has, the Queen has seen the arc come full circle. And it is true that the Prince Charles generation, the generation of her kids, she had a pretty awful relationship, really, with all of her kids. I mean, it was a pretty bad brood for her. They all had divorces and so on. But now she was able to rectify that in her relationship with the grandchildren. And that is also true, as you say, with the people of England. So that all the mistakes that were made in that period of her children have really been able to be just corrected. And they've done it very intelligently. I mean, people said for years, why on earth doesn't William make up his mind? Here's poor Kate. It's a 9-year courtship. But he was so careful. I mean, he'd seen everything that happened to his mother. He had listened to everything that Philip and Elizabeth had told him about the exposure and the difficulty of it and being careful and picking the right thing. And he did turn out to have picked exactly the right girl. And that's really extraordinary.
On balance, you do think, though, that the monarchy is a good thing for Britain, that it stabilizes the country? Or not?
I think it's a fantastic thing. I mean, one of the things that you've got to really admire about the monarchy is how brilliant they are at these public affairs. I mean, this guy, Adrian Ellis, who was the pageant master of this event, I mean, the guy is like the Busby Berkeley of royal affairs. I mean, he took 3 years to create this thing. When you consider how flawless and how amazing the royal wedding was done, they are so good at the pomp and circumstance. They're
right.
brilliant at it. And I think the British people love it. It's such a show. There's no show like it.
Final question. Why do Americans care? Because we clearly do. It's on the television all weekend. Why do you think this is something that is specifically British and very un-American in its essence? Resonates across the Atlantic.
I think obviously, hereditary anything is completely antithetical to the whole American ideal. But I do think that something of the mystery of the monarchy is what excites Americans. Because in this age of super exposure, it is again more and more exciting to know nothing about what really happens behind palace walls. And there is something about the combination of this immense pageantry, the sense of this incredible history. I mean, the Thames is like the superhighway of history when you consider it.
That's a great line.
These boats have been rocketing down that, that
Sure.
river since, whenever it was, Henry VIII. So that is very exciting, I think, in a country that is really comparatively new.
Well, Tina Brown, thank you for illuminating us on the Jubilee. And happy Jubilee to the Queen.